Good afternoon, Richard Duran, Federal Highway Administration.
Thanks, Richard. And I saw Janine as well. Federal Transit Administration.
Good afternoon, David Chilling with FTA.
Great, thanks. And Dan, I see you too. National Capital Planning Commission. Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority.
Ryan Washington, present.
Thanks, Ryan. And National Park Service. Okay, great. So for those of you who I missed on the original call, WebEx has an amazing feature that tells us exactly when you log in. So you will be captured. Thank you. That concludes roll call. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Next up is public comments. A copy of the comments received online has been available to us on the meeting webpage. Lynn, can you provide us with a summary of the comments received?
Of course, thank you. So between noon on Tuesday, May 20th, and noon Tuesday, June 17th, yesterday, the TPB received 1 letter and 37 comments submitted via email. A summary as well as each of those comments can be found on our meeting page, and I'll briefly summarize them now. Bill Pugh from the Coalition for Smarter Growth writes to request that TPB incorporate resilience needs and DMV moves investments in the Visualize 2050 financial analysis. Mr. Pugh states that the flooding vulnerability analysis and DMV moves briefing showed 2 needs. First, keeping residents safe from climate change, and second, maintaining and enhancing the critical transit system. Mr. Pugh requests that the TPB incorporate an illustrative version of the costs addressing regional climate change vulnerabilities and the DMV moves funding scenarios relative to regional revenues and expenditures to supplement the official financial analysis in its long-range plan, Visualize 2050. Mr. Pugh states that this analysis will help in the critical decisions being made about the region's future, specifically the funds addressing flooding and maintaining and enhancing the critical transit system. So the TPB received 37 emails from email campaigns from Monday, June 2nd until noon yesterday. So the email campaigns included content urging the TPB board to reject the currently proposed I-495 Express Lane project. There were 6 emails. And also we received content urging the TPB to include the proposed project, and that had 31 emails. The emails were generated from email writing software, which had some capacity to tailor the email content. So I do encourage you to look at the emails online. So email forms for removal of the project, 6 of them, were similar to the other campaigns we've heard, urging the board to vote to remove the I-495 South Side Express Lanes project from Visualize 2050. There were 2 variations of content. The first, that I-495 South Side Express Lanes would harm the environment and perpetuate inequality. And the second is no way to I-495 Southside Express Lanes. These letters state that toll lanes are not the solution to congestion. They create hazardous merge points and bottlenecks, increase the risk of accidents, and raise serious safety concerns. The letters also claim that there are equity impacts, adding more emissions in overburdened communities that already suffer disproportionately. They state that tolling is unfair because wealthier drivers can pay to avoid delays, while working class commuters cannot, creating a 2-tiered system. The letters question VDOT's commitment to carpool and buses, noting that the carpool requirement has already changed, raising questions about the priority being reducing congestion or increasing revenue. The letters state there will be impacts to routes 4, 5, and 210 that are already congested and underfunded. They raise concern that VDOT's community outreach has been biased towards Virginia residents and has not engaged the communities most affected in Maryland. They discussed a survey VDOT conducted on calling into question the legitimacy of the findings, and they call on the region to invest in public transportation, biking and walking, and not on toll lanes that benefit a few at the expense of many. Now I'll summarize the 31 emails that came in between Monday, June 9th until noon Tuesday, urging support of the I-495 Express Lane project. So there was 3 variations of the content. One was please improve the Capital Beltway. One was titled Southside Beltway Improvements Help Transit and the Environment. And the last, traffic on the Beltway is awful, please fix it. All forms were similar in content, with writers sharing their support for the plan to add 2 express lanes in addition to the same number of free lanes that we have now, adding transit, bicycling, and pedestrian upgrades. The writers state that Virginia and Maryland have no money to make other transportation improvements in this corridor, and that without this project, nothing will happen for the next 25 years except worsening congestion. The writers state that many transit systems are facing financial situations, causing them to cut service and lose riders. This project would make buses faster and more reliable. The commenters support the investment in the new transit services so people will have other options besides driving, stating that more bus options across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge will help reduce traffic and air pollution. As I mentioned, all these comments can be found on our meeting page. That concludes my report. Thank you.
All right. Are there any questions for staff? I didn't think so. So next up is approval of the meeting minutes from the May 21st meeting. We've been provided with a written summary. I trust that we've had a chance to review the minutes. I move that we adopt the minutes of the May 14th, 2025 meeting as provided. May I have a second?
I second.
Who was
I
that?
second. Councilmember Freeman.
All right, thank you. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda, to the meeting notes? Meeting minutes, sorry. All right, for the votes, are there any nays or abstentions from the District of Columbia? From Maryland? From Virginia? Or from the other agencies? All right, the minutes are adopted. Now to the technical committee report. We have a written summary of the June 6, 2025 meeting, and I'll ask Vic Weisberg, chair of the technical committee, if he would summarize the meeting's outcome for us. Take it away, Vic.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Harris. The technical committee met on June 6th, and you can also have a copy of the meeting summary in your materials, and there's also a link. Just sort of quickly, some of the things that we discussed, the changes in the enhanced mobility program, increase in travel options for underserved populations, which is the basis of the central part of the program. So we were briefed by Ms. Sansbury on that program, the changes, and the new process that is underway. We then heard from staff on the new flooding data and the tools that are being used there, which is a really great tool that that has been developed, and you'll hear more about that. We also received an update on Visualize 2050 on the zero-based budgeting recognitions, and just sort of some of the final steps that are going on. Another item was an update on the performance-based planning and programming update, and highway asset and travel reliability performance. We've heard about the travel monitoring program and upcoming COG TPB survey efforts in the next fiscal year, 2026. We had a very brief, we had an update on the Maryland Zero Emission infrastructure plan with an emphasis on participating in their survey, and then the other business items. Workshop on micromobility on June 30th, which is right around the corner, and the Transit Within Reach solicitation period, which has just started June 12th and are due August 8th. And then so a couple of quick staff updates. And with that is my report.
All right, thank you. Now to the Community Advisory Committee report. And again, we have a written summary of the June 12th meeting. I'll ask Daniel Papernick, chair of the committee, if he would report for us. Daniel?
Thank you, Vice Chair Harris. The CAC met virtually on June 12th. The meeting featured a DMV Moves discussion, information on public involvement and communication, as well as a midpoint check on the CAC meeting dynamics. and a briefing on the Enhanced Mobility Program. We also held our local or monthly Act Local round robin. Vice Chair Ra Amin led the discussion on the status of the DMV Moves effort. The CSC is being asked to provide recommendations to the Community Partners Advisory Group by September of this year on the 6 initiatives for which working groups have been tasked to develop recommendations. The CSC is determined to take up 4 of the public-facing initiatives primarily, and those are the fare policies, shared service guidelines, wayfinding and amenities, and bus priority strategies. TPB staff will provide whatever information they can on the status of the action plans to the CSC so that Vice Chair Amin can convey the CSC's recommendation to the CPAG in a timely manner. There were a number of questions and comments and discussion around this effort, and the CSC will devote the entire July meeting to the DMV Moves effort so we can complete our report. We also held a mid-course check-in on our meetings. The members were generally satisfied with how the meetings were being run, but would like more time devoted to discussion and reflection. Staff are going to update the meeting agendas in order to accommodate this. Staff also gave a presentation that you're getting today on the Enhanced Mobility Grants. The CSC is very interested in this program and in the activities of the Access for All Advisory Committee. And CSC member Janine Lee will be our liaison to the AFA. As usual, CSC members are active locally, including our new Vice Chair, Felicia Brannon. Ms. Brannon is a retired transportation professional from Los Angeles. She completed the Community Leadership Institute last spring and is very active in many transportation initiatives in Montgomery County. I invite TPB members to read the CSC report for more details about our discussions. That concludes my report, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from any of the jurisdictions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. Thank you, Daniel. Next up is the steering committee actions and report of the director. We have a written report from Kanti Srikanth. Kanti, will you please review the report for us?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. You have a copy of my report, and I'll be glad to answer questions on any aspect of it. Here's a brief review of what's in my memo. The TPB steering committee met on June 6th, and it approved 3 amendments to the Transportation Improvement Program. DDOT's amendment added about a total of $26 million to the program, with $1.25 million for its bus and bus facilities formula program, $21 million for the rehabilitation of the northbound I-395 bridge over the Potomac River, and then about $4 million for the Anacostia Avenue Northeast Bridge rehabilitation work. With its amendment, Maryland Department of Transportation added about $20 million for its area-wide bridge rehabilitation and replacement program. And lastly, VDOT, with its amendment, added about $39 million for the widening of a segment of Devlin Road in Prince William County, using some private sector concessionary funds. The details of all the amendments are on pages 2 to 28. Moving to the letters sent and received section, you will find copies of a letter from the US DOT approving TPB's FY 2026 budget and work program. Thank you very much for our Federal Highway and FTA partners. This was very timely since our new fiscal year begins July 1. There is a copy of the letter from TPB's input to a request from US DOT to the federal docket on the idea of continuing to maintain a federal database which tracks information on CMAQ funding, particularly emission reductions data. And then there are letters of support from the TPB for 2 of our member agencies. Charles County is applying for a federal bus and bus facilities grant, and then the District of Columbia is applying for regional infrastructure accelerator grants. Turning to the announcements and updates, these are on pages 37 through 40. Staff is currently accepting applications for the TPB's Transit Within Reach Technical Assistance Grant Program. Members will recall that this is a program that provides grants once every 2 years, approximately $250,000. And these technical assistance grants are to the TPB member agencies that are working to improve walk and bike access to the transit stations. We will continue accepting applications through August 8th. Also, members will notice that most of the TIP amendments approved this month by the TPB have added funds for bridges and pavements. In an interesting coincidence, staff also just this month finalized the data that provides us on the condition of the pavements in the region and also on the condition of the bridges. This data has now been updated into a user-friendly GIS tool that is found on the TPB's Transportation Resource and Applications page. The screenshot of that page is on the memo, in the memo, and Amanda is going to now drop in the chat a URL, a website link to where you can access this tool. Two additional announcements that is not in the memo. The board was will be briefed later today about the status of the region's work on developing a vision for world-class transit system in the region and also coming up with new funding to support such a world-class transit system. The COG Board of Directors will be holding their annual leadership retreat next month, and the DMV moves work and plans for next steps will be part of that discussion. I know some of you on the TPB board also serve on the COG board, so this will be a heads up for you as one of the topics that will be discussed. Secondly, and the last item, we will have to reschedule the TPB's September 17th meeting. The September 17th meeting was initially scheduled as a virtual. We will be changing it to in-person, primarily because now the September meeting will have a significant action item, and that is the TPB making its decision on VDOT's request to include the I-495 Southside Express Lanes project in Visualize 2050. This was a decision that has been carried over from last year, and September is when the TPB will be taking that decision. Given the significance of that action, we also recently learned that on that day, September 17th, the DC elected officials have an all-day council session that they will not be able to miss and therefore not be able to participate in the TPB meeting. And therefore, given their interest in participating in this TPB action, we will be looking to reschedule that meeting. You will be receiving a survey on a couple of dates in the following week. Amanda will be sending an email later this week. And we hope to finalize the date and send you an information early part of next month. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair, and I will turn it back to you and happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Kanti. Are there any questions? All right, hearing none. Next up is chairman's remarks, but I don't really have remarks. If James Walkinshaw wants to make remarks, he can make them later in the program. All I'll say is it was great to hear that the budget was approved, and Lynn Erickson seems to be very happy about that. Moving along, we have the next item is the integrated updated flooding data into risk assessment. We've been very active and busy working on resiliency of the region's transportation infrastructure. We recently added the region's transportation resiliency improvement plan to our long-range plan, Visualize 2045. Staff has continued to work on this, and today, Catherine Raynone will provide, I may have butchered your name, sorry, will provide an overview of the new work on interior flooding data. Catherine?
Thank you, and no, you did not butcher it. That was 95% of the way there, so that's perfect. Good afternoon, Vice Chair and TPB Board, and thank you for the time today to provide an update on some of the things that we've been working on at the Transportation Resilience Planning Program here at TPB. So this is just a brief agenda of what I will be going over today in my presentation. I will start with a quick overview of the resilience work that we've done at TPB to date, leading into a review of prior analysis done to understand which transportation assets in the region may be at risk of flooding and why that wasn't totally sufficient, and what we did to fill in some of the gaps with an updated analysis, and then wrapping with some key takeaways and what you all can do with this information. So to start, this graphic represents where we've been over the past 5 years with regards to transportation resilience planning. And then we're going to zoom into where we are today and what future work we'll be holding for the next couple of years and this current fiscal year. So integrating resilience to natural hazards into long-range transportation planning really began in earnest in 2020 when COG and TPB adopted the goal of becoming a climate-ready region and making significant progress to becoming a climate-resilient region by 2030. And each year since that goal was adopted, we have made steady progress. In 2021, we developed the TPB Resiliency Study and integrated resilience into Visualize 2045, which in turn helped inform some of the work we completed in the following years. I was hired at the end of 2022, and we began to build on that initial study with a webinar series to engage member agencies on building capacity and advancing resilience efforts. And then during 2023 and 24, we really hit the ground running with a regional resiliency forum, a risk-based vulnerability assessment, and the associated interactive mapping tool that came out of that. The Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan, which often you may hear me refer to as the TRIP, and the associated priority resilience project list that came with that project, and the formation of the Regional Transportation Resilience Subcommittee, which meets quarterly, and many of representatives from our member agencies are members of that subcommittee. During the course of the vulnerability assessment and the TRIP that we completed in 2023-24, the working group identified an interest in better understanding potential flood risk in our region. So that became one of the focuses of the program for this current fiscal year. The vulnerability assessment showed that roughly 14% of roads and highway miles, 4% of bus stops, 7% of rail stops, and 39% of rail line miles in the TPB region were at risk to coastal and riverine flooding using FEMA floodplain data. While FEMA floodplain maps are a national data set that is one of the standard ways of completing this types of analyses, it only shows where flooding has historically occurred, so occurred in the past, near rivers, streams, and creeks. And our stakeholders in the working group and our subcommittee were telling us that they knew of flooding events that were happening that were not showing up as at risk in this analysis. This initial analysis clearly was not telling the whole story. For the sake of today's presentation, I wanted to take a brief step back to talk about the different types of flooding our region experiences. And for ease of comparison, I have chosen examples of one type of transportation asset today, which is roadways. This photo here is an event that occurred in 2020 in Prince George's County, which was a lot of flooding on Route 50 after a storm event. This spot where this occurred was in one of those FEMA floodplain areas. So this is considered riverine flooding, or to be fancy in the world of resilience planning, fluvial flooding, which happens when the water level in a river or stream rises and overflows onto neighboring land, usually due to excess rain or snowmelt. This area does show as at risk in our initial analysis using FEMA data. We also have sea level rise and associated events that occur in our coastal areas. This area in this photo here is in Old Town Alexandria, and it is both within the FEMA floodplain and also impacted by future sea level rise. So when conditions are just right, high tides can prevent effective stormwater drainage, leading to flooding like we see here in the King Street area. And the last example for today is a third type of flooding that can impact our transportation system, which is often termed urban flooding. And if we're going to stay with our fancy terms once again, pluvial flooding, which is caused by heavy rainfall that overwhelms stormwater management systems that is independent of overflowing bodies of water, so not near any rivers or streams. This type of flooding is not captured in our previously completed risk-based vulnerability assessment that we completed in 2024, since it is not captured in the publicly available FEMA floodplain data, which only takes historical events into account and does not take future changing conditions into account either. So this type of flooding has occurred in our region several times, and this example here on this slide is a photo of the 2022 event on Rhode Island Avenue. Now, new tunnels have been completed since then that address these types of stormwater issues in Bloomingdale and in this area on Rhode Island Avenue, but I wanted to provide these as examples of previous serious flooding events that have occurred in our region, but are not captured in the FEMA floodplain data because they are not near rivers, nor are they near the coast. So I started to ask myself, how often has this been happening in our region? How much information is not being captured in our resilience plans if we are only using FEMA data? I set out on a project with our GIS team to try and get an actual visual representation of why this analysis is important. So what you're looking at here on this slide is preliminary analysis using data from RIDIS, which is a database that automatically pulls in data from multiple agencies to provide an enhanced overall view of the transportation network. And this effort is run by the University of Maryland. So for this particular visualization, every dot on this map represents a reported event of flooding on a road from 2008 to 2024. So any time that a road was closed or had some other issue due to flooding. So there are roughly 5,600 total events, as you can see on the image on the left, with both red and gray dots. The red dots represent the events that occurred within a FEMA designated floodplain, while the gray events are a reported event that occurred outside of the floodplain. I added a second image of just the events that occurred within a FEMA floodplain on the right. So while this analysis is far from perfect due to some limitations of this data set, it definitely matches up with many of the reports from our stakeholders who were concerned that a lot of the assets in our original vulnerability analysis were not showing up as at risk due to the data set that we were using, which again is standard in these types of analyses. So this visualization shows that less than 15% of reported flood events that happened between 2008 and 2024 have occurred within a delineated floodplain. So this really matched up with what our stakeholders were telling us. And so we really wanted to get better information to more accurately show what transportation assets might be at risk to flooding due to extreme precipitation, as well as potential increased impacts in the future. So the goal of this new analysis that I'm going to review in the next couple of slides was to improve TPB's understanding of future inland flood risk and increase the region's resilience and long-term planning. We wanted to broaden our understanding of what transportation assets in our region are at risk to inland flooding. So let's get to the results. There are several ways to get better data and information on pluvial flooding and future potential flooding, including several off-the-shelf data products. For a variety of reasons, along with our consultant ICF and the excellent expertise and feedback from our subcommittee, we selected Fathom US flood maps and acquired data for our region. Again, the important thing to note about this data is that it provides an additional forward-looking understanding of both pluvial and fluvial, so that riverine and coastal flooding, as well as urban flooding, that complements the original present-day FEMA-informed analysis. I do also want to quickly note that VDOT is planning to use Fathom data for a similar analysis, so it's nice that both our region and the state of Virginia will have comparable data. And so we have developed two products from this analysis: an addendum, which is like a short report that will be published alongside the vulnerability assessment and the trip. And we've also updated the interactive mapping tool with all of the new results. I'm going to ask Amanda to pop a link to that in the chat at the end of this presentation. So these products will help improve decision-making when choosing which projects to prioritize and what types of design and construction methods members may want to consider for new projects. So the key takeaway from this analysis is that there are more transportation assets that are at risk to temporary flooding based on the Fathom-informed analysis relative to the FEMA-informed analysis, both across the historical and future time horizons. Again, this analysis reflects how Fathom data captures expanded floodplains by accounting for that pluvial flooding and projected expansion of floodplains due to heavier precipitation and stronger storms in the future. It is important to note and remind folks that Fathom is supplemental to the FEMA floodplain analysis. Both of these data sets offer a unique perspective of flood risk in the region, and both should be considered in planning and decision-making. But with that being said, the Fathom-informed analysis shows roughly 25% more roads and highways, 7% more bus stops, 13% more rail stops, and 25% more rail lines at risk to flooding when compared to FEMA floodplain data alone. So for the next couple of slides, we're going to be looking at this general snapshot of our region, but with the analysis for different assets turned on and off. So here on this slide, we have roads and highways. And on the left-hand side, we have the Fathom-informed analysis, and on the right hand, the FEMA-informed analysis. Fathom-informed analysis identified 38% of roads and highway miles at risk in 2020, compared to 14% in FEMA-informed analysis. It is especially prevalent in DC, which is a densely developed urban area with a lot of opportunity for that urban flooding due to extreme precipitation. And I'm just going to leave this slide up for a couple of seconds. So folks, if you're trying to locate your area or something, you can take a closer look at it. Next up, we have bus stops. The Fathom-informed analysis, again on the left-hand side of the screen, identified 11% of bus stops at risk in 2020, and that's compared to the 4% that were identified as at risk in the FEMA-informed analysis. For rail stops, the Fathom-informed analysis identified 21% of rail stops at risk in 2020, compared to 7% in the FEMA-informed analysis. I do also want to note that for rail stops and rail lines, this analysis did not factor underground versus elevated rail stops and lines. It's just not data that we had available for all stops and lines across the entire region at a geospatial scale, so we were not able to include that. And lastly, for rail lines, Fathom-informed analysis, again on the left, identified 64% of rail line miles at risk in 2020, compared to 39% in the FEMA-informed analysis. And again, I know that I'm only showing screenshots of the DC region. We completed this analysis for the entire TPB region. It just was a little bit messy having the screenshots of it being zoomed out. So I wanted to include it so that folks could really see the differences between the two types of analyses. So just to recap some of the final takeaways we have from this project, we were able to provide a forward-looking analysis that was requested by stakeholders to help the region better understand transportation assets that are at risk to flooding due to precipitation in addition to flooding near rivers and streams. And we have delivered an analysis using the Fathom floodplain data to address that concern. This information can help empower our regional planners to evaluate resilience investments and transportation projects across multiple future scenarios and planning horizons for better decision-making. And lastly, we all know that more information can often make long-range planning stronger. So these results can help strengthen the region's overall preparedness and ability to adapt to future inland flooding challenges. And finally, a few ideas for what you and your staff can do with this new analysis. First and foremost, the results of this technical analysis can be used for awareness, that more assets than just those in the FEMA designated floodplains may be at risk to flooding both now and in the future. The tool can also be used as a resource for various policy decisions. When resources are limited, more information can be quite useful when it comes to prioritizing projects for design and construction, so this tool can be used for project prioritization measures. It can also be used as supporting information and documentation for members when pursuing federal or state funding. More information about a site or a project's potential vulnerability can lead to better specificity in a grant application. And lastly, for today, if you want a more in-depth presentation or discussion of these findings or how to use the new data in our tool, please reach out to me and I would be more than happy to set something up. Several of our member localities are working on similar analyses at a smaller local or watershed scale. I know that DC is finalizing their integrated flood model at the moment, and Montgomery County is working on something similar for a few of their watersheds. And so those are just two examples of, I'm sure, many others. As a regional organization, we can focus on the larger picture to get a broader understanding of how future changes might affect the region. But we are looking forward to continuing to work together with our member localities and agencies to plan for a more resilient region together. And this is my contact information in case anybody wants to take me up on a one-on-one conversation. I would be really happy to do that. Our tool is really cool, but it could use some hand-holding if you're not used to using these types of mapping tools. So please feel free to send me an email and I can set something up. And I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. I see Chair Walkinshaw is back. Do you want to take over?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Vice Chair Harris. Appreciate you stepping in and good to see everyone. Let's go ahead and open it up for questions. Start with any questions from the district. Be first shot to why don't I'll just go in order of hands that I see raised here because folks are putting their hands up. I saw Dave Snyder first. So go ahead, Dave.
Thank you very much. Please forgive my voice sounds a little different. I had some oral surgery recently, so that's the reason. As the elected official chairing this group, I want to commend the incredible work done by TPB staff. Catherine, this is really groundbreaking work. I think it indicates a challenge for mitigation for climate-related issues that the region has to address. And we know that every serious rainfall seems to bring about flooded areas that are not only inconvenient, but threaten life and safety. And so this work, I hope, will be very much integrated in individual planning efforts and region-wide planning efforts going forward. We simply have to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I see Kristen Weaver. Go ahead, Kristen.
Yes, hello, Kristen Weaver, City Council in the City of Greenbelt. Thank you for the presentation. My questions were related, and I think sort of you got to it a little bit at the end, but I wondered if there was any plan for communication directly with the communities where these areas at risk are located, or because I know Greenbelt has been looking at doing some stormwater analysis in sort of within our jurisdiction of some of the areas that we know have flooding and may not be covered by some of those FEMA flood maps. So I guess my first question is, are there any plans for that communication from your side, or is it best if we just, I'll pass this information on to city staff, have them reach out to you? And then I guess as sort of connected to that, because I think some of our analysis is not so much about those transportation assets, but it seems like some of this analysis could be useful for non-transportation assets that are still sort of within those flood risk areas. So I don't know if there's, a regional conference where the actual staff members that are working on these issues could come together and learn how to use that tool, or if you had any plans for that sort of thing going forward.
Sure. I'm going to answer your second question first. And I think that's a really good idea. So basically we acquired this data set and we have it until the end of December. And so I'm planning on setting up, we just wrapped this project like literally 2 weeks ago. And so I'm planning on working with the COG side, kind of discussing with them, is there analysis that you want to do? We have this data, we can use it for the next 6 or so months. So we can work with them, they can use it. The problem is, the challenge with this is that the data set comes from a private sector company, and they have very strict rules about how the data is allowed to be used, because they don't want us buying it and then us just giving it to everybody else so that they don't go out and acquire it themselves. However, we are allowed to share the results of the analysis. So we can share anything that we created that does not allow someone to sort of reverse engineer to get the original maps. So yes, I think that's a good idea. I'm going to work with Jeff and Katie Dyer and Steve Bieber and see, is there any sort of land use COG side stuff that you could, property level things that you could use this analysis for. So that's kind of the non-transportation stuff that we can do, I think. And then plans for comms, again, just wrapped this. And so I probably am expecting to do the committee parade, present this to some of our other committees, both at TPB and COG. I do think that either this Community Advisory Committee or the Access for All Committee might get at some of that community level stuff, but I'm definitely welcome to sort of working with our members. I think a joint effort here would make sense. If the board is interested and wants to sort of connect me with some of the folks in your own locality or agency that are interested in this, I can come and set something up, or I can definitely see what the community committees think. Maybe, yeah, I'm definitely open to setting up workshops like that with however folks think make the most sense. I'll probably talk with Conti about next steps for this and go from there. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other questions on this topic?
Mayor Ashton from City of Rockville.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Ashton. I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is super helpful. And I know in February, FEMA did send a list of new properties that were impacted to some, I assume they did it to all jurisdictions. But if we wanted to, I understand we can't get the data set, but if we wanted to query and say, are there areas within our municipality, and I also want to make sure I'm understanding of your staff capacity as well. But is there a way that we could query someone on the team without, violating the contract that you have, to at least understand more specifically the local areas that are either yellow or red?
I think we would probably need to start with just looking at the analysis portion of it. We, unfortunately, due to the disclosure and to our contract agreement, we aren't able to share the raw data with anyone. But if there's a project that we could do now that we have this data for another 6 months at a regional scale, something additional, something different that is not captured in the analysis that we did, I don't see why we couldn't. So as long as we do it at a regional scale and there's no way for anyone to reverse engineer it, let's talk.
Thank you so much.
I'll connect with you after this meeting and we can sort of see what you might be interested in.
Yeah, and I will just note, I know we're talking about transportation here, but this also has an impact for housing as well.
100%.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on to our next agenda item? Okay, Allison, we see your comment there. Okay, thank you. Great work, great presentation, great discussion. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is enhanced mobility, increasing travel options for underserved populations. And every 2 years, we provide grant funding to organizations in our region that are working to improve transportation for older adults and people with disabilities. And we're in one of those years. So Charisse Stansbury will give us an overview of the federal enhanced mobility grants. Charisse.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sharice Sansbury, and I'm the program manager for the TPB's Enhanced Mobility Program here at COG. I'm here today to inform you of the Enhanced Mobility Program's upcoming solicitation initiative, looking to continue increasing travel options for underserved populations such as older adults and persons with disabilities. The purpose of this program is to improve mobility for seniors, older adults, and individuals with disabilities by removing barriers to transportation services and expanding the transportation mobility options available. Federal grant funding is awarded from the Federal Transit Administration, FTA, through COG as the recipient to applicable projects COG and the TPB find deserving of these federal dollars. Projects awarded in past rounds have included the acquisition of wheelchair-accessible vans and buses, volunteer driver programs, travel training, mobility management, and sidewalk bus stop construction. We encourage applicants to get creative when seeking ways to support and expand transportation for these underserved populations while remaining inside the parameters of the coordinated plan, which I will discuss more in detail in a couple of slides. Over $64 million has been awarded to 172 projects during the last 13 rounds of the Enhanced Mobility Solicitation since 2007. The JARC and New Freedom programs were the beginning of the program with $22 million funded for 59 projects assisting with transportation for low-income populations and persons with disabilities. Around 2014, the program was revamped as the Enhanced Mobility Program with focus centralizing on older adults and persons with disabilities. Since then, the Enhanced Mobility Program has awarded $42 million to 113 projects during 6 solicitations. Our program was recently featured in a National Aging and Disability Transportation Center profile, showcasing our best practices and innovative approaches to program implementation. We were honored to be recognized as a leading example for others within the 5310 sector and look to continue successfully supporting the organizations that provide alternate transportation services to those that need it most in our region. Projects are awarded based on their responsiveness to mobility improvement strategies identified in the TPB's Coordinated Human Service Transportation Plan. This plan was last approved by the TPB in May 2023 and is updated every 4 years. The plan outlines strategies that help facilitators of programs, such as the Enhanced Mobility Program, meet the targeted transportation needs of the region. These strategies include door-through-door or escorted transportation service, the increase of wheelchair-accessible options in taxi and ride-hailing services, tailored transportation service for clients of human service agencies, which includes vehicle acquisition, the increase of access to transit stations, volunteer driver programs, mobility management, travel training, and coordinated planning efforts. We currently have active projects that touch each of these areas in different ways. The next few slides will highlight some of the projects that have received Enhanced Mobility funds from each jurisdiction within the Washington, D.C. region. Seabury Resources for Aging is an organization dedicated to providing personalized, affordable services and housing options to older adults in the D.C. region. Seabury's Tailored Transportation Service for Older Adults in the D.C. region project was awarded $368,381 in capital and operating funds throughout the Enhanced Mobility Program during the Round 6 solicitation. They seek to acquire a 15-passenger bus to expand their existing fleet to a total of 3 vehicles, enabling them to provide 1,600 more older adults with transportation services each year. Their operating funds will be used toward the maintenance of these vehicles, as well as the salaries of the individuals operating the vehicles and other program needs. Transportation efforts include bringing members to wellness centers, restaurants, medical facilities, and other types of excursions. Seabury is located in Washington, D.C., and serves multiple cities and counties within Maryland and Northern Virginia. Opportunities, Inc.'s Travel Training for All project was awarded $375,000 in capital funds also during the Round 6 solicitation. Opportunities, Inc. was first awarded through the Enhanced Mobility Program in the Round 5 solicitation, and then was awarded again in this latest round. Their mission is to advocate for, empower, and support full inclusion of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They operate out of Lanham, Maryland, and offer travel training within Montgomery and Prince George's counties. The purpose of travel training is to assist those with disabilities in learning the best and safest ways to travel. Travel training with opportunities includes teaching individuals how to take the metro and/or bus to their workplace, the specific facts about their route, and how they can use their tablets provided through the grant to track their routes. The training also ensures that the individuals are aware of what to do if things go wrong. Opportunities will use funding awarded to supply these travel training services to 200 participants for 5 hours per month, 60 hours per year for 2 years. They will also train 30 new direct service professionals to work with participants one-on-one. DATA, also known as the Dulles Area Transportation Association, is a longtime subrecipient within the Enhanced Mobility Program and was recently awarded in the Round 6 solicitation as well. DATA's volunteer driver and travel training program to assist seniors, veterans, and individuals with disabilities project was awarded $500,000 in capital funds. They plan to expand the availability of transportation services to underserved populations, recruit and train volunteer drivers, and expand their travel training program. Their mission is to accomplish these goals while also working with local businesses to offer sustainable commuting options. DATA operates in Reston, Virginia, with partnerships occurring within Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William counties, as well as the city of Manassas. The 3 projects I've highlighted are just a sample of the 47 projects currently active throughout the region. We have more project samples and case studies posted to the COG website, some of which were recently featured at our 2025 Best Practices Forum, which occurred on May 21st. These case studies highlight who exemplifies best practices within particular areas of the program. Multiple case studies have been developed over the years showcasing Enhanced Mobility subrecipients and their projects. Please visit the website linked here to view those case studies when you have a chance. We'll have an opportunity this summer to identify new Enhanced Mobility projects. The 2025 grant solicitation is underway. Beginning last week, we started the process of advertising the solicitation to COG committees and stakeholders. Please know that your local government may receive funds from this competitive grant program. The program has successfully funded wheelchair-accessible vehicle acquisition and paratransit operations in the past for Fairfax County, Montgomery County, the city of Hyattsville, and Prince George's County. It has also funded accessibility projects for the city of Alexandria and the city of Rockville. If your jurisdiction could benefit from receiving these funds, please feel free to have someone from your transportation departments contact us for more info. We will hold pre-application conferences in July explaining the application process to those who wish to apply. The application window opens on August 1st and closes on September 30th. Projects must benefit populations within the urbanized areas shown on the map here. As you can see, areas that are not within the green space will not be eligible to receive Enhanced Mobility funding toward their projects. Nonprofit agencies, private providers, transit agencies, and local governments can apply for federal funding within the program. Capital and operating projects that improve transportation for people with disabilities and older adults are the types of projects that will be awarded funding. A matching commitment is required for the funds awarded, with a 50% match being required for operating grants and a 20% match being required for capital grants. This local match must be identified in the application. The anticipated funding available is estimated around $10 million. Following the conclusion of the application period, all applications will be reviewed by a selection committee, who will be a key source in choosing which projects will be awarded. This committee will be comprised of local representatives and national experts. The committee will be chaired by a TPB member to ensure the TPB is included in the selection process as well. The selection criteria established within the coordinated plan are what the committee will use when reviewing and scoring each application. This criteria includes coordination among agencies, partnerships, responsiveness to the coordinated plan. The actual scoring will be seen on the application. Capacity to manage an FTA grant, which is very important and something that the enhanceability staff will pay much close attention to, especially regarding previous grantees. Project feasibility: do not apply for more dollars than you can spend or do not set out to accomplish more than you're capable of. Regional need, and customer focus. Once the selection committee has selected the projects to be awarded, we will submit the projects to be endorsed by the TPB in late 2025. For anyone that would like to speak with me offline, my information can be found here. Thank you so much for allowing me this time to showcase our program to the TPB, and please let me know if you have any questions.
All right, thank you, Charisse. Great opportunity for all of our jurisdictions. Let me go ahead and open it up to any questions or comments. You can raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Am I missing any, Conti?
No, I don't see any either
Okay.
at this time, Mr. Chair.
All right, that means it was a thorough presentation. So thank you, Charisse. Great job. We'll move on to our final agenda item, which is DMV Moves update. And it's an information item, but it's also an important heads up and reminder for all of us. The DMV Moves initiative, it's a joint initiative between COG and WMATA that TPB has been supporting for months, aims to bring world-class transit or even more world-class transit to our region and provide sustainable and predictable funding for all of our transit systems. And they've been doing great work. And pretty soon, we as policymakers will be asked to enact policies at the local and regional level that further enhance collaboration and coordination among our respective transit systems that serve the region, and to take action to raise new funds for transit in our region. We do have some of our TPB colleagues who are part of the initiative. Charles Allen, who I don't think is with us today, but he is the co-chair of DMV Moves. So he's keeping close tabs on it for us. And we're fortunate today to have Eric Randall from our staff, who's going to provide us a briefing and an update, and then we'll have a conversation after. So Eric, take it away.
Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm here to provide an update on DMV Moves. Again, you'll notice this is a COG presentation since DMV Moves is supported by COG and WMATA staff. Want to recognize Allison Davis, our WMATA board member on the TPB, and her team, who've done a lot of this work. A lot of this content you'll see is from them, as well as the expert consultants we have supporting us in our work. But I'll go ahead with this presentation. There's a lot of text in this presentation. I will not read it all aloud, but breeze through it as quickly as I can so it makes sense. Next slide, please. So I'm going to recap a lot of the content from the last DMV Moves task force, which took place 4 weeks ago on May 16th. Again, a video of that meeting and all the presentations and other materials can be found on the website, dmvmoves.org. So if anybody wants to catch up on the materials, please visit that website and take a look. I'll also remind the TPB that you had a presentation from Nick Donahue, our experts facilitator, just a couple months ago in April, and there's a link to the slide deck there on the cover slide. if you want to go back and review what he said. So I'm going to be providing basically an update what's happened in the past couple months with a little more detail as we work to flesh out the various proposals that we brought to the task force in this fall. Particularly, I'm going to talk a little bit about financial needs, talk a lot about regional coordination across the bus services in the region, and then next moves and what TPB and COG could do to contribute. Next slide, please. So just a reminder, this is a project for all the region's transit services. We have Metro Rail and Metro Bus, which carry over 80% of all the transit trips in our region. But we also have 12 local bus systems, 10 based within the region, as well as 2 based outside the region that operate into our region. A couple of our systems also operate commuter bus, and we have MTA commuter bus as a standalone system, our 2 commuter rail, Mark Veary, Purple Line. And of course, there are multiple paratransit or specialized human services transportation providers out there, some of them funded by the 5310 program you just heard about, and many planning and funding organizations. So we're trying to harness all these cats and work together on moving forward with a more combined plan for the region. Next slide, please. So 2 main avenues for DMV moves. One is on financial needs. As the region grows, as we come out of the pandemic, as transit ridership ticks up back to pre-pandemic levels, and perhaps, and even in some respects, exceeds pre-pandemic levels on the weekends on bus, we need to fund that service as well as account for future employment and job growth and population growth. And we also have capital needs. We need to keep the system in a state of good repair, and we need to modernize and expand the system to allow for that future growth in our region. So how can we do that? We obviously need more funds to operate what we have, but we can also work on our regional integration across all those systems I just covered. A big focus of DMV moves at the staff level is turned around customer experience. What can we do to make things easier to understand for the customers? And I'll be talking about that a lot in the second half of my presentation. Besides making that customer experience seamless, we also want to improve our regional coordination. Personally, I think that a lot of the informal connections that we had across the jurisdictions pre-pandemic really suffered during that pandemic. We were no longer having meetings together, jobs and positions changed out, and we lost a lot of that coordination that was taking place somewhat informally before. I think we also need to renew our emphasis on a more formal coordination and ways we can economize and provide service efficiently and more integrated across the region. Next slide, please. So the DMV Moves Task Force, again, 4 weeks ago, was briefed on the latest funding concept for Metro, again, our largest operator of transit in the region. Metro, as you know, got dedicated capital funding both from back in the 2007-2008 era, PREA, and renewed dedicated capital funding from the 3 states in 2018. What's happened since then is that there's been quite a bit of inflation. Costs of everything have gone up. Staffing and things like steel, concrete, vehicles, it's all more expensive. And those were fixed funds. And so basically, we're staring at a point where without those new resources, Metro is not going to be able to fund its state of good repair program, which is, again, Metro Rail is a 49-year-old system, started operating in March of '76. So we're only 9 months away from celebrating its 50th anniversary. Some of that technology dates from the 70s. It's a rotary dial phone. It needs to be replaced. And if we're going to replace it, we might as well replace it with an iPhone or Android phone, not a rotary phone. Can't even find those anymore. So they need more funds. And so Metro staff estimated this at $450 to $500 million per year in additional capital funds starting in fiscal year 28, a couple years away. And those funds this time also need to be linked to growth and inflation, not fixed dollar amounts, but growing with the region so that they continue to fund their state of good repair program. Beyond reinvesting and modernizing in Metro, the other focus for funding is bus priority. We have an extensive bus network in the region, but we can make it more, faster, and better by focusing on capital improvements. We have our one little BRT system, Metro Way in Alexander, Arlington. We have the Flash 29 up in Montgomery County. Montgomery County has been working on BRT for close to 30 years. We can implement that faster. We have TSP, about 7 bus corridors in the region, but we can put, transit signal priority, but we can put more transit signal priority out there. We can give buses more dedicated lanes in the peak or off peak, deliver faster, reliable service. And here's the critical part. If we make those capital investments, we make bus service better for customers, and we realize operational improvements because the buses can be faster, which is better for the customers, and also reduces our operating costs. So if we can invest in that system for bus priority, we can achieve better service and operational cost savings. And that's why the focus is really turning towards this for DMV Moves. Next slide, please. So modernizing Metro, these are Metro slides. I'm sure Allison will be able to answer any questions on them. But Metro is looking at how, again, to take that system, again, in operation for 49 years now, and adapt it really for the 21st century. So the focus is definitely turned towards automation, again, replacing that old technology with new signal systems, new technology, which will make the system faster, much more reliable, taking away what was there before and putting in new modern systems like the rest of the world experiences. So modern signal system, upgrading the current rail cars and the new 8000 series rail cars that will be arriving soon. And then if you look at that picture on the right, it shows a picture of what Metro Station would look like with platform screen doors. This is where the system is enclosed between the trains and the passengers, which improves safety, improves docking for the trains, improves reliability, all sorts of advantages. And this is what's happening in transit around the world. Basically, any new metro system being built is now being built with platform screen doors. And many older systems are being renovated. Even Paris has taken lines which date back over 100 years and retrofitted them for platform screen doors. So the idea is that Metro is working on a big plan. Lots of staff hard at work. I believe it's December. They're hoping to present a plan to their board for further discussions. This is much more in the planning phase, but this is where they're really seeing the opportunity. So next slide, please. So if we had rail automation, system would move from what is called grade of automation 1, GOA1, or manual service, through new technology. Currently, Metro is at about at grade of automation 2, with the recent news that all the lines have moved back to automation. But the system could move to grade of automation 4, where you don't even need an operator in the cab. Again, the train goes down the tracks, turns around, it can all be handled remotely or through automation. And what does this do? It makes the train a lot faster. It also reduces turnaround time. And you can kind of see how a trip on the red line would go from 150 minutes from start to finish down to less than 125 minutes, 122 minutes there. You're reducing the number of trains that are needed, which saves on capital investment and costs. And you're also making the trip faster and more reliable. And so this is a big difference. Again, if we can make these capital improvements, we both save on operational costs and make things a lot more pleasant, faster, better for the customer. Next slide, please. So talking to bus service, again, this is where we see the opportunity for expansion and improvement to the transit system beyond just Metro Rail. Any customer you ask wants frequent, reliable, fast service. When buses are caught in traffic, along with the cars, trucks, every other vehicle using the road, it costs us money. If you have a traffic slows down by 10 minutes, this adds 20% a time penalty for customers, so they're unhappy. Their bus is slower, it's less reliable because it gets caught in traffic. And meanwhile, costs go up even more than 20%, because not only are you paying for another driver, but you also have to pay for part of another bus in an annualized cost. And so costs go up even more than 20%. So if we can correct this, move buses the other way, faster, more consistently through a bus priority network, customers are happier and we save operationally. Next slide, please. So again, here's some of the aspects of frequent bus service. If we have bus priority, the roads can be made safer. The experience on 16th Street in the district, on other corridors where bus priority has been implemented, is that the streets are safer, fewer accidents, fewer collisions, fewer people being hurt. The system becomes more reliable, so we don't have to plug in extra schedule time to allow for variability in travel time. And of course, the bus is faster. We can move a lot more people, a lot more throughput on a road. I think 16th Street Northwest in the district carries half the people are on the buses, not in the cars. And of course, then we can save money. So you can see the banner at the bottom. Again, our region's streets and traffic signals can and should work harder for transit and bus customers. That's how we can improve the overall transportation system for everyone in the region. Next slide, please. So how to implement bus priority regionally. This isn't exactly a new concept. I think Montgomery County's first BRT plan was 1992 or so. You can see some of the current ones on the right there, as well as ones dating back a decade or more. But part of the DMV Moves Task Force is going to be an ask, almost a demand, to commit to a regional partnership to collaboratively implement all these plans. Let's take action and do it. Especially, let's focus on those high ridership routes, those that cross jurisdictions, and provide a frequent service network so that most people can benefit from faster buses. We've certainly already discussed at the last task force meeting, and we're going to discuss some options, but consider a regional fund to make these improvements. Again, if we make those capital investments in the streetscape, in the bus priority network, we can save operationally and improve things for customers. And the things we can do are bus lanes, all-day hour service, transit signal priorities, so the bus gets the green light when it's there, space at the bus stops, fast level boarding, a lot of other improvements. Next slide, please. So I talked already about the metro needs. We're actually just refining the local transit needs. As you're all aware, many of the FY26 budgets were only recently being improved in the last couple weeks. So now we know what FY26 needs are for the local bus agencies, and we can extrapolate from there. But our previous analysis back at the turn of the year was about 146 million. That was to improve operations starting in FY28 and to fund extra capital improvements, again, new buses, upgrade of facilities, everything else. This is what we need just to operate that service in a couple of years as we come out of the pandemic, as federal funds are moving around. But we need to get this funds to make the investment if we're going to operate a world-class transit system. We're also going to do a bit more analysis, looking at guidelines which are being developed, and I'll talk about that soon. But looking at the gap between what we have now and what we would like to have, also as an estimate of local transit needs. Again, we're just updating these numbers, so there'll be new ones the next couple months, but it gives you a ballpark picture of where we should be at for bus. Similarly, in commuter rail, VRE and MARC, both are just about to release new updated plans, System 2050 for VRE, the MARC Growth and Investment in Infrastructure Plan. So we're trying to just holding our breath, waiting in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, for new information. Again, those costs will be updated. And none of this even assumes what will happen once the Long Bridge opens in 5 years, and we have the opportunity to implement a regional rail system with VRE potentially could operate every 20 minutes all the way down to Prince William County and on the Manassas line. Lots of opportunity there if we can find the money to make those investments. So these figures, though, will all be updated soon. Thank you. Next slide, please. So for funding requirements, the DMV Moves Task Force and the advisory groups, the government partners advisory groups, and then the community partners advisory groups that you were briefed on by the CAC chair, have agreed that funding's got to be reliable and predictable. We can only plan these capital investments years into the future, sign contracts, make these investments if we know that funding is going to be available for Metro, we know, and the other transit systems, and it's going to be there. And again, that money needs to grow with inflation. We can't say just offer a fixed value and then watch that value of it be eroded by inflation over coming years. Ideally, this should be bondable to smooth out ups and downs. You buy a bunch of locomotives for the next 5 years, and then you don't buy any for 10 years. We need to be able to smooth out the flow with bonds and also make upfront investments that are critical. And while accountability and transparency are very important, there are ways of doing that without putting in restrictions or encumbrances on where funds can be used and what purpose and locations or what have you. Let's reduce or minimize those as much as possible so that we can use the funds most effectively across the region for a regional system. Next slide, please. So sort of break. This is now the second half of my presentation. There's again a lot of text, so I'm sure you'll all be able to read it. I'll try to flip through it as quickly as possible. Picture there of the task force meeting back on May 16th. Next slide, please. So again, a lot of this focus that we're turning to on DMV Moves work is on the customer. How can we make transit easy to understand and plan your trip, pay your fare, navigate the stations, the bus stops, where to go, answer your questions, make the wait for service as minimal as possible and as comfortable as possible, make the ride as fast and reliable as possible, all these things to improve the customer experience. And then, of course, as operators internally, we need to know that we are tracking what's happening. So we need good data on what's happening with all our customers so that we can continue to monitor for quality assurance and continue to improve the system. What gets measured gets managed, in other words. Next slide, please. So we've had a series of working groups in 6 areas. You'll see those in a minute, working on actions for better integration. Again, we're working with all the current operators and service providers in the region. No changes to that planned, but looking at all the things that we could do to make service better. And I'm going to go ahead and let's skip to the next slide because I'll be covering many of these in more detail. So we've had 6 working groups since December working on 6 areas. Fare policies, so it's easier for the customer to pay and understand what that payment needs to be. Guidelines for how often, how long at night or in the morning service should operate and how we can measure that performance. Improving customer information and amenities at transit stops. And then implementing bus priority strategies. I've already talked quite a bit about bus priority strategies, so I'm not going to talk about that again in this presentation. But again, that was one of the 6 working groups. And then 2 working groups really focusing on internal management and administration, if you will. How can we share or collectively use resources and assets and group our procurements to improve the back end of how we purchase things and use assets across the transit industry? And also training, certification, inspection, particularly many skilled staff, mechanics, electricians are nearing their retirement years, just the way the workforce is structured these days. How can we get new people in, train people to use those services? Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 5 of the areas. Again, I already talked about bus priority in the first half of the presentation. So fare policy, how can we make it simpler, easier for the customer to understand and use? So 3 things: universal transfer credit. When I get on my first vehicle, whether it be a rail or a bus, I pay my fare. If I then get on a second vehicle, bus, rail, whatever it may be, ideally I would get credited for that first leg if I'm just making a connection or trying to get from my origin to my destination. So taking all those systems that currently accept the smart trip, smart card, making those universal transfer credit, because not all of them currently accept it. And then in a few years downstream, looking at how we can get commuter rail, commuter bus, whether we're all paying with credit cards at that point or what other fare system there should be. But if I say take a VRE train in and then I need to take a bus for half a mile, should get credit for that trip. So universal transfer credit. We're also looking at expanding regional transit passes. What passes can we universally apply across the region? How they can be used in all the systems? How do we share revenue for all those passes, which has kind of been one of the sticking points to date. And then low-income discounts. Metro has its Lyft program. Several jurisdictions have their own low-income programs. Do we need reciprocity? Do we need common eligibility? How can we make those parallel and accepted across the region? And then we would have all those benefits that you would see on the right: improve the rider experience, improve ridership, make transit more competitive, use transit more often, all the things we want. Next slide, please. So service guidelines and performance reporting. This can be a little dry at first, but the idea is we're going to have a world-class transit system. What should be the world-class transit system? How do we define it? So those guidelines would define what that system should be. High ridership routes, how often should the bus come? When should the bus start in the morning? When should it end at night? Should we have late night service on rail and bus? How can we commit and fund those services to meet that regional service guidelines? And again, as operators, as providers, how do we monitor and make sure that we're providing those needs? How do we know that we're running our service effectively? And with all our multitude of operators, we really need a common set of performance measures so we can see what's going on and we can report back to decision makers. Again, accountability, transparency on what we're providing. And again, the benefits would be better ridership, better expectations for operators, for funding agencies, for taxpayers, enhancing the customer experience, and making our decision making more data driven and accountable. Next slide, please. So again, customer experience, a lot of focus here on bus stop design. This is particularly important for our communities that are impacted by or have mobility needs or have vision issues. You know, when you're making your way to the bus stop, you know, where is the information located? Is it located in a consistent space? Is it provided in a consistent way? So that if you're a bus stop in one jurisdiction, it's the same or awfully close to it in another jurisdiction. So floating bus stops in particular have been a hot issue among planners recently. That's where the bus stop is separated from the sidewalk by a bike lane. It's very confusing for folks, you know, even leading collisions. But how can we make that system common across the region? So some of the things we're proposing: unified bus stop flags. If you walk up to a stop and you have 2, 3, 4 signs even from different providers, it can be confusing. Which bus am I getting on? Who do I call for information? Would I have a choice between 2 systems? So particularly with the Better Bus program that's rolling out here in just 11 days, you know, Metro's putting in new bus stop flags that are also covering Prince George's and some of the shared stops in Montgomery County. But should we have, you know, longer term, should we have a consistent bus stop flag across the region? And then we have to identify that technologically, you know, an ID system that tells where that bus stop is to anybody who's looking at it, whether it's a customer or an agency or another agency that's trying to provide connecting information to a customer. When a customer calls for information, should we have a one-stop number? Metro recently changed its number, 1-800-GO-METRO. So, you know, is Metro the call center for the region? Do they need additional resources if they're becoming that? You know, a lot of jurisdictions have their own call centers that also do other things, but how can we streamline, centralize where it makes sense, you know, transfer calls as necessary to make it easier to understand for customers so they aren't standing there going, who do I call? Where do I find the information? And again, this would all benefits would all be a better rider experience, help riders, particularly ones who are new to the system or making new trips, provide them more cohesive experience across the region. Next slide, please. So moving internally, what can we do together? Maryland and Virginia already have cooperative programs across their states for bus procurement. But we're here in the DMV. You know, Metro obviously procures 100 odd buses a year. The other agencies together also procure another 50 a year. Maybe we should work together more often on joint bus procurement. That means standardizing specifications, working together what makes sense for everybody in the region. But what are the benefits for that? It means we can get economies of scale when we go out to the manufacturers. It means we could have a common store of parts. We can have common training for maintenance and technician staff who work on those buses. So we can achieve economies of scale, both on the purchasing and on the upkeep of those assets. And COG already does a lot of this procurement on other regional activities. So we're looking at this as an opportunity for COG to be involved in how to make things simpler. And again, besides buses, there's everything else that goes together in running any mass organization. So IT software for the bus companies, things like security cameras for their facilities, tires and fuel, of course, towing services, specialty warranty support for things like electric bus chargers, you know, new technology. Not everybody has the experience. If we work together more effectively as a region, again, a lot of the informal coordination that used to take place sort of broke down a bit during the pandemic. But let's bring it all back together and establish a more formal process for doing it. Next slide, please. And so besides assets, again, let's look at training, our human capital. You know, how are we getting those new bus operators, new train drivers? How are we getting those skilled trades, mechanics, electricians? How are we training them? A lot of the agencies have sort of small efforts with their local community college or even high schools in some cases, but maybe there's an opportunity to centralize that for the region. Creates a larger group, economies of scale, everybody's trained in the same systems, creates a talent pipeline. And also looking at things like certification. If I'm certified at a regional academy, then do I have to go get separate certification in Maryland or Virginia or DC, depending on where I'm working? How can we change requirements, licensing, everything else, so that we don't have to deal with those cross-state boundaries, but work together? And again, a lot of benefits we'll experience out of that, but again, stabilizing and adapting our workforce to meet future needs. Next slide, please. So apologies, Chair, a lot of words. Now we're moving to the closing speech, but putting the action in the regional integration action plan. So all these working group plans and everything else, we're working on them every day now as we're assembling a regional integration action plan that will go through all the recommendations or options coming out of these working groups. But for DMV moves to be successful on this regional integration, we need to get everybody on board. We need broad participation, we need commitment, collaboration, and accountability across all the agencies. So the task forces and advisory groups will make their recommendations. Again, not every action can take place right away. Different agencies, different jurisdictions may move at different speeds, but we all want to be going in the same direction. And this will require changes by the states, by local jurisdictions. We may need changes in processes and procedures, in procurement requirements, in specifications. But if we need to come together as a region, we'll have to be adaptable and flexible to make those changes. The transit agencies, transit executives will be responsible for implementing these. And a role for COG or other regional actors is to continue to facilitate that continued collaboration, monitor performance, track commitments. So I think coming out of DMV moves, we'll probably be coming back to you here at the TPB, as well as COG, as well as Metro Board, as well as other boards in Virginia, Maryland, talking annually about what's happening in the region and how we're doing and implementing these things. Next slide, please. So next step, DMV moves again over the summer. I've got 2 more months. We'll be working on fleshing out this regional integration action plan, a lot of staff work being done, as well as the initial funding recommendations that are going to come to the task force, again, based on those metro investment concepts that I showed you, as well as the updated funding needs for commuter rail and local bus. So this fall, we expect to have a DMV Moves investment plan. What are the needs for capital investment in our region? We expect to have a regional integration action plan, and we expect to have a set of funding analyses and strategies to fund that investment plan and help support the implementation of that integration action plan. A couple meetings are still up in the air. We're going to have those advisory groups to get together in September, task force most likely in October. And then we're tentatively somewhat looking at a final joint board meeting of COG and Metro boards November 12th, which would be the closeout of the DMV Moves effort. Again, things can change. Next slide, please. So just stepping back, this is my last content slide, but wanted to talk to you about the role of TPB and COG and where we see ourselves going forward in 2026. And again, COG is not directly a funder, and TPB are not directly a funding agency, not an operation agency, but what can we do? Our job is facilitation, regional forum, and monitoring, looking at the data, providing information to you, the decision makers. So we're looking at that regional bus priority planning and implementation as the way of expanding our system and making it world-class transit. How are we doing that? What can be done? Getting the DOTs, the roadway agencies in to talk to the transit people, making those connections, working together. And again, cooperative procurement and purchasing, again, already a COG activity, one that can be expanded more into the transit area. And then generally reporting on performance and accomplishments and reporting on the specific regional integration activities. And so next slide, please. That completes my presentation. Obviously, Conti does even more on DMV moves than I do. So he'll be available to answer questions. And of course, we have Allison as an integrally involved staff at Metro as well. Take it away.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Conti, anything to add before we open it up?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you. I think your preamble remarks that this is really a heads up and more of that there will be a call for action on the part of elected officials and decision makers in the region towards the end of this year if we were to realize world-class transit and to bring about that operating efficiencies. So I think that's where we are, and we, the TPB, if and when the TPB is called to assist in moving this forward, whether it is through facilitating meetings between the various agencies to reach agreement, whether it is to help develop a regional plan, or whether it is to report periodically on how we are progressing. The TPB has a regional public transportation subcommittee. We produce an annual state of the public transportation report. So we have mechanisms already set up that we would be happy to bring to play as needed. So I saw Allison if she wants to say anything from WMATA's behalf.
Allison? Nope. Allison's here for, we can't hear you, Allison, but yeah, maybe you're on mute now. Now you're off mute, but we still can't hear you. So if there are questions for Allison, maybe we'll let her answer in the chat. But let's go ahead and open it up and see if we have any questions for Eric, Conti, or Allison in the chat. Go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, I don't see any questions. I want to make sure I don't miss any. Dave, did you have a question? Snyder?
I guess one.
Okay.
We have a constrained long-range plan that applies to everything we do. Where will the financial constraints be integrated with the ideas about what can be done?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Snyder. In fact, I was wondering if that will come up, and not surprised you brought it up. I was just going to say the TPB has been working on developing a regional long-range plan, Visualize 2050, and all the inputs are in, except for one project that we will be deciding in September. As you've noted, the projects that can be included in Visualize 2050 must have identified funding for building, implementing, operating, maintaining that project. So it is fiscally constrained that way. So because of that, any plans that VRE, Eric mentioned about Vision 2050 plan that VRE is working on, Mark is working on the system expansion plan, WMATA has plans for their systems, and many of our local bus systems. If any of those plans are unfunded, then they are not in Visualize 2050. Therefore, when we present to you in September, what can we expect our transportation systems performance to be in 2050, it will not have the benefit of all of these improvements that could be done and maybe the local transit agencies would like to do, but they don't have funding. So they're not included yet. That said, if the DMV Moves initiative is successful in finding additional monies for all of these projects that Eric went through, and if the DMV Moves is successful in having the 14 different transit agencies actually collaborating even more to bring some service efficiencies, all of those will result in more transit service in our region, which we can then include in the next update of our long-range plan. So, number one, getting policy agreements that this is where we want to go. And second, having legislative action completed that will raise new money. Those are the immediate two steps. And after those two, we can bring any of these improvements back into the TPB's long-range plan, which we believe we will be able to see better performance of the transportation system in the future. It's not a surprise for many of you who've been on the TPB before. In September, when we present to you the anticipated system performance in 2050, you will see that congestion will still be there. It'll be there in a significant amount because the region is growing and we are not congestion free today. So I think that we can begin to bend that curve. We can begin to change that trajectory with additional funding, particularly on the transit side. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice. All right, I don't see any questions. Want to thank everybody for your time today. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, July 16th, 2025. Lynn, is that's an in-person meeting, am I right? Yeah, so we'll be in person Wednesday, July 16th. And Conti and Lynn, if there's nothing else we need to share, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Wow, it came in 15 minutes.